Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. We're going through the Gospel of John. We are at the end of chapter 15. We have a presentation by Gary. I'll be talking to Gary about the presentation as we go through the presentations. After which, please keep notes. We always cover a lot of ground. Please keep notes of questions you have, comments you have, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions and to have comments. All right, so let's get started. Gary.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and let's see if I can share the screen. Is everybody able to see that?
Yep.
Fantastic. So this actually a professor of mine, I was doing some work on the Gospel of John, and he pointed out a particular word in John 1:18, and he said, this word is very interesting and has a wide range of meaning in Greek, and not a lot of people write about it. And so he just kind of dropped me that and didn't tell me what it meant or what was going in there. Just kind of vaguely said it has like an oracular connotation, and the word is exegesis. And so I did a little bit of study on it, and that's what this presentation is called, the Exegetes of Athens. And it's related, I kind of relate that to our study where we are in our studies of John in chapter 15. And so does anybody want to read this? Do I have any volunteers?
I'll read it.
All right, go for it.
All right, I'm just going to read it right from the screen. John 15, verse 22 to 27. If I had not come and spoken unto them, they had not had sin, but now they have no cloak for their sin. He that hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which none other man did, they had not had sin. But now have they both seen and hated both me and my Father. But this came to pass that the word might be fulfilled that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause. But when the Comforter is come, whom I will send to you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, which proceeds from the Father, he shall testify of me. And you also shall bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning.
Thank you, Evanique. So this is our text that we're working on for today. And I kind of highlighted and italicized the portions that are specific to this presentation. This verse right before, the bold part right there, and then the little italicized part afterwards. And so, which is the whole thing, is if I had not done among them the works which none other man did, what does that mean? And if you read the Aquinas commentary in advance, he spends quite a bit of time going over this, trying to explore what that is. And so that's the theme of this presentation today. Does anybody else want to read John 1:18, this one little verse? Otherwise, I can read it.
I can go ahead and do it. No man has seen God at any time, the only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father. He has declared him.
Yes.
Note, that's it?
Oh, yeah, you can read that little note there.
Note, the word declared is the Greek word exegesis. The word exegesis can also mean explain, but narrate.
And so this is really kind of the thesis that I'm having right here, is that the work which no other man had done, that he talks about in John 15:24, is what Jesus has done that nobody else has done, is that he has explained the Father. And so the presupposition is that the law comes from God, and that the Torah, this divine instruction, is the explanation of God. And what John is saying is that maybe that's true, but Jesus, who sits face to face with God in John 1:1, that's what it says, proston theon, the word is right there, face to face with God. You have later on, it says, no man has seen God at any time, but the Son who sits face to face with God, he has explained the Father. And so that's the unique thing that's taking place. And this was where Shrikant said he wanted to speak up.
Yes. So I want to go back to John 1. You know what? We can stop sharing the screen because I'm going to just talk about John 1. And this is so difficult because, every time I read this text, I get new things from it. So, and this particular point, I'm going to actually just focus on one word. And it's the word which is usually not really focused on much. But the more I think about it, it seems to be really the heart of the whole of the gospel. And so let me begin. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. So I'm going to just focus on he was in the beginning with God. What we're trying to do here is to focus on what word is, what is word. But I think the key word here is with. I've been spending the time last 2-3 days just looking at the word with. Now you may say, what is this? With? Are you serious? And I am. So let's look at the word with. Okay. I'm telling you that translations do not do justice to this text. The word with, the word that is translated as with, is the word pros. It is advantageous for. So this is, look at the range of meanings. Keep aside your preconception of what the word with means, okay? And try to just see what the word pros means. It is properly motioned towards and interface with, literally moving towards a goal or destination. It is towards. It indicates an extension towards a goal with implied interaction and reciprocity, with presumed contact and reaction. It naturally suggests a cycle of initiation and response. So the word was with God. So what is this with? What does this with mean? Now, I'm coming at it from two different angles. In one, I'm using all the work that Julian Jaynes has done on consciousness. Julian Jaynes holds that consciousness is an analog of reality. And that is achieved through words. So word is with God. So the easiest way of thinking about God the Father for me is to think of him as thou. So there is thou, and the word is with thou. So what does it mean to be with him? So firstly, again, let's take the sentence. I'm going to again take the sentence. He was in the beginning. with God. When you translate that, he was in the beginning, actually the better translation, the same thing translates it also as from the beginning. I think that actually captures what the word is better. So the word from the beginning is with God. Okay, so he is in the beginning with God. And if you look at everything he says throughout the gospel, he is reminding you continuously, I am with God, I am with God, I am with God. He says it in multiple ways. I'm the Son of God, I'm this, I'm that, but all of it boils down to I am with God. And even at the apex, the climax of his glory, when he's saying, my God, why have you abandoned me? He is still with God. The God is still with him. Everything that is not with God, he is taking on the pain of it. And for that moment, there is this darkness. He's still with God. And then he continues to be with God afterwards. So he is with God throughout. Just like John, when he says that I am the disciple that Jesus loved. Jesus throughout says, I am the one who is with God. So that with is really the identity of Jesus. He himself says that is who I am, that with. Okay. So I want to just go through everything that Gary is saying about the word and look at what this word with means. What does it mean to be with God? So I want to put that out. That's the only thing I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about everything with that as the base. Go ahead, Gary. You're on mute.
Say thank you, Shrikant. I got to say that, before I continue, that it's really humbling to do this Gospel of John series, because, I want to be a scholar someday. And then everybody else that contributes always has like these insights. I'm like, how come I didn't think of that? And so just thank you. It was really good. So I'll return to the presentation. All right, are we there? Okay.
Yes. So
I got 4 parts, and I'll go through them. Actually, I don't think it'll take too very long. I already said what the main point of everything of what we're getting at is that Jesus, the Logos, he has explained God, and he has explained the Father, and that's the main point, is what I think is being called on in John 15 when he says, the works that I have done, which no one else has done. The first part is something called a Euthyphro dilemma, and I'm not going to get into it too much detail because it'll get way too confusing. But it's actually a very comedic dialogue, one of Plato's really funniest dialogues, and he actually makes fun of the characters in the dialogue. If you get a chance, jump online and look it up, and it's worth a read. And in this dialogue, there are 2 murders, and they're wondering what to do about all of this. And the key point, what's this dialogue centers on, is somebody called an exegete. And this is a person that's appointed to determine matters of law. And so they summon an exegete to figure out like what's the next course of action here in the context of these murders. And so the 2 main characters are Socrates and Euthyphro. And they engage in a discussion, and the topic of the discussion is what is the nature of piety, and what makes the good good? Like how do we know that something is good, and what determines that? And so in the Gospel of John, Jesus is the one who explains the Father. And like I mentioned before, the word explain or declare or narrate is that word exegete. And so when it calls Jesus, saying that he's explaining the Father, it's as if Jesus right here in John 1:18 is assuming this role of this exegete, this oracular person that's supposed to be able to determine matters of law. And in the context, the exegete is oftentimes is appointed by the Oracle of Delphi, is this person that has a direct line with God or the gods, and is able to communicate the meaning of law from this divine perspective. But Jesus is also the Logos. And it appears that John's gospel is offering a solution to these questions, as to what is the nature of good and what is the nature of piety. And so I think that that's what's kind of going on in John chapter 1. So we've talked about this extensively. The word logos means word. And then I think quite a while back when we were doing John 1, I did like a kind of a deep dive into the meaning of the word logos. And so some of this is just kind of a rehash of some of that. It also means different things in different contexts. This was a pluralistic world where you didn't just have Greeks, you had Jews, you had people from multicultures, outside of Greece, people all coming and going in the Roman Empire. And so we'll look at some of those. All of those ideas are floating around. And so in Greek philosophy, the idea of the logos is this idea of universal reason, or what Heraclitus called it, the central directive constituent in nature, or what we might call the laws of nature. The Greeks kind of had like I would call it like a Greek Enlightenment in a sense, is they were trying to explain the nature of the world separate from the gods. And so the theory of logos in Greek philosophy is something that is explicitly non-divine, and so you have, aspects of, mysticism and Greek religion, but then you also have this very naturalistic aspect where they were trying to like rest free from anything like that. So logos is a metaphor for both reason and the fundamental laws of nature. Anything you want to say, Shrikant, before we go further?
Yes. So what I want to do is I want to keep going back to John 1 and talk about all these observations in terms of John 1. So there is God who just is. And word is words that we use. And when the word is with God, so let's take, think of God as nature, think of God as thou. When the word is with nature, it captures the central directive of nature. That's what, when the form in which the words that Jesus uses are different, but he's trying to get to the same point. He's saying, I'm obeying my Father's will. I am following the law of nature. And he's doing it through consciousness. He is with God. His consciousness is focused on God. So when your words consciously are focused on reality and are acting with reality, that is what reason is. It is being conscious, using words, thinking with reality, in accordance with reality. So, that's what I would say. I see this. I want to also circle back on the first point that you made. So you have got the Tao, you've got the word, which is in accordance with the Tao. The next step is all things were made through him. So it's the natural law as captured in words, which is creating everything else without him. So now again, I'm focusing only on prepositions here, okay? So look at it, things, so just focus on prepositions, because our tendency is to focus on nouns. But to understand this, we have to focus on prepositions. What does through mean? So it's saying all things were made through him. So that means there is the law of the nature itself. There is the Tao. It is being grasped as a principle, and that law, in that sense, so it is at once the law of nature and the thing that is shaping the foundation. Law is nomos, which is the foundation of the world. It's the foundation of everything. And that is shaping everything, forming everything. Without him was not anything made that was made. So what he's saying is that everything is the product of the Tao. The 10,000 things are made by the Tao through the word, through the explication of the law, through reason. So it captures that entire progression. Please go on.
So I'm branching off from, what else does, the word logos means word. In Hebrew, we have the word debar. And if you were to have a Hebrew translation of the New Testament, that's the word that would be used for John 1:1. Bereshit, deber, hadeber was the word. So like the logos, the Hebrew deber also means word, but it also means law. And so we're relating back to this whole idea. It's this interesting thing that, I don't know how much of it is coincidental or it's just the philosophies came together and produced this thing. There was just like so much synergy that was going on, is that, in the Greek mind, logos refers to the laws of nature. And in the Hebrew mind, deber, the word, is also the law. The 10 commandments are the 10 words. That's explicitly what it says in Deuteronomy. The Hebrew title of the book of Deuteronomy is the Devarim, the words, making reference to the second law. And the opening line of Deuteronomy, these are ha'ela, the words, the Devarim, which Moses spoke, diber. And so, the same thing, the words and to speak, just as we've already noticed looking through the word logos, it has so many different uses. And so lego means I speak, and it's derived from the same thing. Is there something you wanted to say right now, Shrikant? I see you leaning forward.
Yeah, no, I will go ahead and say something about each of the slides, because these are just wonderful slides. What I want to say is that this work is a tremendously integrative work. So each word here has such a rich meaning at every level that coming from the modern context, it is difficult to grasp it. Just like the word with is so deep. The word, for example, saying that word means law. Look at how much is being captured in that. So what it is saying is that it is, on the one hand, the word is capturing the law of nature. It is by being with the Tao, with the Father, the words are obeying the law of nature. It is also the lawgiver. It is through the word that the law is given, law of mankind is given. The law which will be the foundation of civilization, of a divine community, is being given through that. So I think this is a great, and to see that in Hebrew doing the same kind of a thing that is being done in Gospel of John is wonderful. Please go on.
And so, as we've already talked about, John 1 through 4, which Shrikant read through portions of it, especially with, focusing on the word with, and then the role of Jesus in the creation of without which nothing was created that has been created. And what's being referred to there, especially in John 1 through 4, that's this evocation of this wisdom tradition, which that's another one that I've talked about previously in different lectures, and we've had a lot of slides on it. So I don't want to bore you with, a whole nother 10 slides on how much of the wisdom literature is being evoked in just this one little section. But this is a quote from, Proverbs 8, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ago at the beginning, when the world came to be. And so, that's kind of the picture that I chose too, is this is Lady Wisdom sitting there holding the entire world in her arms. I think a previous slide that I had used was when was the 7 pillars, 7 pillars of just that the foundations of the earth are laid upon wisdom. Did you want to say something here also, Shrikant?
Yep. Yes, and I second Evanique's. Please bore us with everything that you say, because it's just wonderful. It has the exact opposite effect, and these things have been repeated a million times by a million people, billions of people across history. So everything good, bears repetition. So I want to focus again on just show the richness of this word. The word as wisdom. So how, again, we talked about word as being with the Tao, capturing the law of the Tao, providing the law to humankind. Wisdom. So what is wisdom? Wisdom, how is it that the word is wisdom? Word is wisdom by being with God, by being in accordance with God. So wisdom, if you move to Taoism, it is simply acting in accordance with the Tao. So that is what wisdom consists of. So what we have is that we have all of these different concepts, which are all differentiated. And in our analytical mind, we keep them separate. But what you see here in Gospel of John is this incredible concentration that each of these things are kind of like this, kind of like this. They have so many different aspects, but it's all one. And each of these facets is making the understanding of the word richer. Please go
on. So what is the Logos? And again, this is a very incomplete, list. I would speculate that in John's mind, that the Logos is wisdom. Or if we were going to talk about Tao, that the Logos, that Jesus isn't just in accordance with wisdom or in accordance with Tao. He is the Tao in some meaningful way. That's how John is conceptualizing it. Just as, God, the Father creates wisdom from time of old and then consults wisdom in the creation of the universe. There's this sense that Jesus is right there and is the embodiment of wisdom and is that constituent force of nature that from which everything goes. And the importance of all this is that when this is our setup, for the whole rest of the gospel, is that when Jesus speaks, we're not supposed to just be looking at some wise sage that has a bunch of nice things to say or performs a couple of miracles. He is the embodiment of universal reason. If you're a Greek, you're going to see he is the logos. He is it. He is the laws of nature are here in personal form, acting in how they are. And so it's like we're learning what the laws of nature are. The moral law of God, the Torah, is also implied there. We spent a lot of time talking about the command to love and how that was already common in Jewish literature and Jewish tradition, that to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself, that the entire law, all the law was captured in those commandments. And so when Jesus utters the law and says, love one another as I have loved you, he's speaking not just as this is some sage-like advice or even quoting something else. He's speaking from the personage of wisdom. This is wisdom speaking, saying, I loved you. I created all things. I'm the beginning and the constituent nature of the universe. But also that's really kind of what I'm getting at, is that this moral law of God isn't just something to be followed. It's part of the fabric of the universe. Did you want to say something? I
had a question.
Yes.
Can you explain the term the beginning of knowledge? Why do you say beginning of knowledge?
I think it's kind of like, it's just natural for me to say that phrase, because in Proverbs it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And there's this really intimate, even in the phrase the beginning of knowledge, there's this intimate relationship that you don't know anything if you don't know God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a point I might have in one of the other slides too, is that to know anything is to know God. Even when we talk about discrete things of the universe or scientific facts, even if we're seemingly not talking about, even if we're atheists and we don't believe in God at all, to have any knowledge of anything in the universe is really to dwell into the mind of God, is to learn about the nature of God. And so yeah, some of it is just a habit, but that's really what I would say. That's what I'm getting at there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very well. Thank you. I want to again emphasize these three things. I will start with kind of law of nature. So let me, okay. Can you stop sharing? I want to show.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is again a very odd way of putting it, but I'm going to use it anyway. And I hope it speaks to you, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay. I did this thing on metaphors, and I read a poem where they were comparing Krishna or thou to a peacock feather. So there's so many different aspects. It has, like, if you look at it very closely and you close your eyes, you can still see it, and you want to see it all the time. So you're focused on it all the time, but it has so many aspects and it keeps changing. And it is almost, so it creates this combination of, yes, it is, the I am is there. You can see the I am, but what it is, you cannot fully grasp. It's like you're continuously, you're just awestruck by the complexity, the depth, the richness of it. Okay, so that's the Tao. Now, the way in which the Gospel of John works is that there is a second here. Okay, there is the Word, which is with the Tao. Okay, and the Word is God. So it is analogous. He is analogous. He's like God. He is God, but he's different at the same time. And the most important is that he's conscious of God. There is something flowing back and forth between these two. And as they move, they are different. They are interacting with each other in a different way. And what is going on between them is continuously changing. It too has a similar nature. That width also has a similar nature to the nature of the Tao, the God the Father, God the Son, and what is between them. All three are very much, going back and forth. So if you just look at God the Father, you can talk about, from the list of that Gary has, you have the laws of nature are there in the Tao itself. This brings the consciousness of the laws. So that's the universal reason. In the word is the universal reason. And the universal reason is not there by itself. It actually makes everything, and it guides everything, and it's the ideal for everything. So you sitting here on this side, through the word, is getting what you should be doing. You can't see God directly. You can't see God directly. But you can see God. You can see this God. And he makes this God known to you. And what you get is not just knowledge, not just wisdom. What he's giving is not just laws, not just wisdom, not just universal reason, but also what you should do. He's giving you the moral law. Okay, that's it. If you could continue.
Thank you, Shrikant. Before I, go back to share. There we go. And I think I brought this up in a previous presentation before, that that what we should do, this action, it's even if we were atheists and we had no moral standing and we decided that we were going to be evil, horrible people, to be successful and to make money also requires some sort of congruence with the laws of economics, the laws of nature, and the list goes on and on, the way people interact with each other. And the Bible has a robust description of wisdom, says that even that is the wisdom that comes from God. It's inescapable. Anything that you want, to obtain anything, to have any kind of prosperity or flourishing or a growth, requires access to wisdom. And even if you think of yourself as antinomian, you're still accessing the wisdom of God for anything and everything that you have in this life. And so it's a very big picture that transcends, don't fool around on your wife. This isn't what this is about. It's a very big picture. And so we lead to this thing where it's just a little section on the exegetes of Athens, that the exegetes were a class of people who interpreted laws. We could think of them similar to like priests. Although they had a specific legal standing, is like when there was a violation of law, the exegete, not quite a lawyer, but was there to like interpret the law for you and to tell you the will of God, through this. Some were appointed by the Oracle of Delphi. Some were assigned by political rulers. Some were selected by people. And I include some of this information just because I'm trying to be a good scholar and give you the information as it presents itself. But they all serve to provide moral and legal guidance. So here we are, we're back to our verse. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. And so here we are with, he is the exegesis of the Father. And that's really kind of what I'm getting at, is this oracular sense that's being evoked in this discussion of piety in Plato's dialogues is kind of coming to a fore. And I think that's what John is kind of like alluding to right here, is that Jesus is giving us that information directly from God to us. And that's a unique thing. You know, that's what we're looking at in John 15, is that nobody else has done this. Jesus is doing a work which no one else has done. He has explained God to us. Shrikant, did you have something?
Yeah. I again, I'm going to strongly recommend folks that you should use the interlinear Bible. I use the Bible Hub. In Bible Hub, I think there is interlinear Bible. I just want to point out, like, exegesis, right? Because what happens is that actually each of these words have tremendous depth, and they had a wide variety of usage, and that entire symphony of multiple uses of the word was what was meant when this word was used in this text. Now, when it is translated, only one aspect of it is carried over, and you lose the entire meaning, entire depth of the meaning of each word. So what you're getting, I love the translation, okay, the English translation. But what I'm telling you is that when you start looking at the original, just word by word, only with the words that you find interesting, you will discover a richness and depth of this text. So let me just read out different flavors of the meaning of exegesis. It is to give exegesis is to show the way, to lead, to unfold, to narrate, to declare. It means completely out of, from, to lead by showing priority, properly lead out completely through bringing forth, to explain or narrate in a way that clarifies what is the uppermost. But you can see the full richness of this word. And I just want to say, just as a plug for words, okay? Words are actually very, very deep things, okay? What people do is that they use corpses of words at best. They do not know how words live. And there is no substitute. If you really want to read something, and if you want to read something like this, which is actually alive, you really need to know how each of those words lives, because each of them is going to go and explode in your mind and make so many different connections that you will understand what is being said much better. We are creatures of habit. We just read a sentence. In the beginning, he was with God. And when you do that, it is beautiful, beautiful sentence. It's just, it's incredible. But if you do not dive into each of the words, you're probably getting, at least I was getting about maybe 10%, maybe 20% of the beauty and the power of what was being said. Go ahead.
Your comment on words reminded me of when I was in Germany, and I asked somebody, what's the word whipped cream? How do you say that? Because I was at a restaurant, and I learned that it was Zahnhüte, which literally means cream hat. And so it's like, like only, and it's really, that's something like a German speaker just says, oh, whipped cream, and they don't think of it. But coming from the outside and looking at it, saying, oh, I want a cream hat on my coffee or on my hot chocolate, there's a certain joy to be found there. And I say that as as novices looking at something like the Bible Hub and looking through the interlinear, you're actually it's gonna be delightful for you to do that in a way that scholars like they get so familiar with the language that they kind of lose some of that. And so I think just like what Shrikant was saying is I just want to reconfirm what he was saying is that it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to get a lot out of it. So yeah, the Logos, Jesus, is universal reason, the laws of nature, the moral law of God, the wisdom of God, and the beginning of knowledge. He's the explanation, narration, and expression of God, not just a moral stage. He's the whole sage. He's the whole picture. He's the fundamental law of the universe. And that's what John is trying to do, is saying that Jesus, the fundamental laws of nature are somehow embodied in Jesus, not just a great sage or a moral way of living. There's something very visceral here, where it's ineffable even. So which takes us to our last portion. The Logos, Jesus, is inseparable from the fabric of the universe. And that's what John is saying in chapter 1, the first 4 verses. Everything that was made through him, and without him nothing was made that has been made. Is all of it is there. And he is the Logos, and he is the wisdom. He is all of it. He is God's moral instruction. He is the Torah. And this is an important thing. Usually people translate the word Torah as law, but it's more properly the instruction. And so it's almost an ethic. It's a little bit more robust than simply just a thing that you're supposed to do. It's a way of thinking. To pursue knowledge, even discrete knowledge, this is something I talked about briefly, is to ultimately be in pursuit of God, that it's inescapable. Anything we know is ultimately knowledge of God. Did you have something you wanted to say, Shrikant?
No, let's go to the next one.
Okay. And so here we are. If I had not come and spoken to them, they had not sinned. This is where we're at in John 15. Because Jesus explains the Father, rejecting Jesus, it's like rejecting the universal moral law. It's like rejecting the laws of nature in some sense. But now they have both seen and hated me and my Father. Because Jesus explains the Father, hating Jesus is the same as hating the Father. And this is kind of a famous or a common, people refer to it a lot in John 8. This is the prelude to that famous I am saying, where Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. Is leading up to it, Jesus says to them, you are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. And so he's talking about this opposition to the universal law that's taking place, saying that unlike me, you're not face to face with the Father. And so in John 13 and 15, Jesus repeats the only
let me comment on the previous one.
All right, go for it.
Can you move back to the previous one? Oh, thank you. So again, I want to bring up this idea of width and connect it to the concept of center and periphery that we've been talking about. This is all about being with the center. Being with the center means being focused on the center, acting from the center, acting towards the center. And again, the word hate is also translated as loving something less. So this is saying that now that I have shown you, actually, let's go one slide back. If I had not come and spoken to them, they had not sinned. So what he's saying is that my words, I am a word, and I am with the thou. I am with the center. And I have made the center known to you so you can see it now. you were focused on the periphery because you did not know the center, because you cannot see the center directly. Through me, you can see the center. Now that you can see the center, if you still say that I can see, but I do not see the center, you are basically saying that you love the center less than the periphery. And because I have made, by me as word, by being with the center, I have made it known. The second one follows. Let's go to the next slide.
And I just want to say you explained it better than I could, because that's exactly what's taking place is the revelation of Jesus to his opponents is this confrontation with the truth. And to reject that, it's like, that's where it talks about the world is already convicted of sin or is already judged without him. He confronts them with the truth. He invites them to the center. And if they choose not to, if they choose to go to the other way, then they're convicting themselves. It's not God judging them, as this was your choice to run away from it. You're choosing the darkness over the light. And that's it's all on them.
Yes.
There's and I actually wanted to, I think in the last slide presentation, bring this up, but there's a couple of places in the New Testament where it talks about the wrath of God as being revealed from heaven. We're like, oh my gosh, what, he's such an unloving God. Is that revelation is for people who are there, it's incurred, it's self-incurred on them through a rejection of the truth. What's really revealed is God's divine grace. It's showering down. And when they look the other way, they just go ahead and embrace the wrath. It's the shunning of the grace. So
yes.
I wanted to say thank you that you kind of explained it better than I could, and I kind of needed your help to lead into that thought.
Well, thank you.
The next slide.
Yes, please. Thank you. But now they have both seen and loved me and my Father less than everything else. So it's like the periphery is there. They were not able to see the center because center is hard to see. Now they have seen the center because the word has made the center known to them. Yet, when they turn their back on the light, life is in the word, and the life, and he is the light of men. If after that, men choose to turn their backs on the light, then they prefer the darkness. The periphery is simply, the devil is simply the periphery. They prefer that. You are of your father, the devil, or the periphery, and your will is to do the Father's desire. So whatever it is in the periphery that you react to, that's what you're doing. And you're doing that because you are loving the center less than the periphery. I think the less actually captures this because it is like orienting. It is not a different kind of a thing. It is simply saying, I prefer this. Like exegesis is explaining priority of things. Center is before the periphery, before. Again, all these words, like before, all the prepositions are so key to understanding. It's saying that is the foundation. So the fruit is, and the vine is, but the fruit is of the vine. The vine is before the fruit. If you want the fruit and like the vine less, you will neither have the fruit nor the vine. That's what he's saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, so John 13 and 15, Jesus repeats the only explicit command in the whole Gospel of John, which is to love one another. And this was when I briefly looked at John 8, that was actually the discussion that Jesus was having with his opponents. Is he's like, I did all of these gifts, all of these wonderful works. Which one of them are you thinking that you want to stone me? And they're like, no, we're not stoning you for a good work, and so he gets into this debate. And right there in John 8, he foreshadows the love command. He's like, this is the fruit. If you don't love this, you're not seeing it, you're not getting it. And so the question is what was the sin of the people? Is it because they failed to love their neighbor as themselves? Because when they threaten to pick up stones and throw them at him, they're failing to love their neighbor. They're also failing to love God, because to love God means to love one's neighbor. And so that's what's captured right there in John 8, is this, without uttering the love command explicitly, they're having this debate on the love command and what it looks like. And Jesus is saying, look here, I'm doing these things. I'm healing people. I'm raising the dead. I'm giving sight to the blind. Why are you upset? And I think you nailed it, Shrikant, with this whole, the idea of to hate is to love less. What they were oriented towards was themselves, and being threatened by these good works done by others. Just as me, being a scholar, feels threatened by Shrikant, who is new at all this, but has insights that I never come across. And so it's like, my gut response is to combat that in some way. And it's like, okay, no, I'm supposed to love. What did you want to say, sir? I think you're still on mute.
I need to show people something. So could you stop sharing for a moment? Okay, now let's look at the love command and the meaning of that with respect to width. Okay. What I'm saying is that width is actually the love command. It's the same thing. And that's actually the foundation of everything. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Okay. That relationship, that width, that reciprocity is all that he's talking about. There is nothing else to the love command other than the width. That is it. What is he doing? He's saying, look, the width is very profound. He's saying, I am in my Father, and my Father is in me. In is another preposition, which is the same. It is trying to get to the same thing as with. What is he doing? He's saying, look, this is me and this is my Father. What I'm trying to do is, this is you. What is the width between these two? I want the same. I love you. You are with me from the beginning. So that same width that I have with the Father, you have with me. And because you are with me, you are with the Father. So it is like this. You are children of God if you believe in my name. Again, onoma. That is, if you believe in my character, if you act in my character, just like me. So just like I am with God, if you are acting in my name, that means in my character, then you too will be with God. And there is nothing else to the love command but that. It's just with. So that with, and again, when in, I think, chapter 16 or 15, 16, he talks about you in me and the Father in me. All of that is the same thing here. What is he doing in the love command? He's saying he's transmitting that with that is there between the Father and the Son to between him and his disciples. And then he's saying, transmit the same thing to other disciples who have the same. So it is basically treat other people as if they were me. Because all that really matters is the width. If you have the same width, that you have with me, Jesus, if you have the same width with another person, the other person, that's what it means to love one another. There is nothing else. So that is what he's talking about. So the love command is simply there in the first sentence, is in John 1. There is nothing else as far as I can see. That's it.
So that was the last slide. And
Okay.
You actually captured everything that I was getting at in that last slide, because from the very beginning, John 1:1 is this theme that I brought up last week, this theme of reconciliation. That God is there reconciling the whole world, the whole universe to himself. And so John 1:1, those first few verses give us a picture of that intimate space, that how the whole universe relates to God, how it just flows and emanates and radiates his character, and how that's right now, for whatever reason, we're not in that space, but that's what we're going to. And it's love. It begins with the love command. It calls us children of God. It's from the very beginning as the love command. And so when it's finally, expressed in John chapter 13, it's like what we've been waiting for through the whole Gospel of John. It's been all leading up to this. It's like, this is what it's all about. This is the law, the fundamental laws of nature, the laws of attraction. We see this in popular everything. It's Rogerian therapy. The list goes on and on. It all comes back to the same thing, is to love.
Thank you. I want to then put that final touch on this. So what I'm saying is that this is God, this is the Son, and this is you. And really the core idea is that of width. Okay, so what is width? There is a width. And that is the Holy Spirit. That is what is between Father and the Son. That is what is going to be released. That is what is going to remind people of the word. That is what is going to, what people will have to create the community. That is the meaning, that with is the Holy Spirit, because that is there right in the beginning. So the Trinity is there. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So it's not just you. It is all things here. Anything. You can put an X here. And that X, when you're dealing, when you talk about namaste, you're saying God in me greets the God in you. I am my spirit is with your spirit. That is the meaning. And that is the thing that actually holds together a community. That is the bride of Christ. That is the church. That is heaven on earth. That's what you're trying to create. You're trying to create that witness which was there, which is the Holy Spirit, active in your life. So that's my understanding. Thank you, Gary.
No, thank you, Shrikant. That you brought up actually another insight that you had brought up and that I ended up sharing with one of my professors, is that the entire Gospel of John can be understood as the gospel of the Holy Spirit. Is that, that the whole point of the farewell discourse is that Jesus is leaving and the Holy Spirit is abiding with us, and the gospel is written from that perspective of the future after Jesus has already left. And so everything that the Holy Spirit does for us now is embodied in this story of Jesus. And so it's hard for us to like wrap our head around, like, how is the Holy Spirit here with me? It's a spirit, it has no form. And so by concretizing this doctrine of the Holy Spirit through the works of Jesus, saying the Holy Spirit is only doing what Jesus did, and let's see what that looks like through the life of Jesus. And so there's a sense in which the theology of John isn't about Jesus at all. It's about the Holy Spirit right here, right now in our lives. I don't talk much, I don't say very much about the Holy Spirit, because it's one of the most poorly understood and misapplied doctrines ever. Everybody blames everything on the Holy Spirit. Everything they do, they say they're led by the Spirit. So I just focus on the example of Jesus. and then we'll get to there later maybe, because it just gets too confusing for people. But thank you again, Shrikant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. This is just amazing. Thank you. All right, folks, I would love to hear any comments. We'll go with comments first. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share your thoughts about the presentations. We'll start with Joe.
So fantastic presentation as always. I mean, there's a lot that you covered tonight in particular. That was like a lot of information. I mean, I really appreciate the highlighting of the word with. And I think it's also, it's important to look at all three lines in the beginning, like, and see the difference with the middle line. I think that's helpful, because in the beginning is the word, and that is talking about God's everlasting nature, that it's eternal. And the word was with God. That's the sameness of the word and God. That's the personhood. And the word was God. That's the eternal. It comes back to the eternal nature. So I think that's a very important point, because it's identifying Christ as God. And as we've talked about, is Christ is the light, the new light in the world. He's the new source. He's the embodiment of wisdom and truth. So, so essentially, Christ is like the salvation, and as Gary was saying, for the world, and he's here to essentially reconcile the world. And this passage in particular, he's performed miracles, and people have a choice to step into the light or go back into the darkness. And that's the decision that we have to make. And the other thing is that it brings a spiritual clarity to the world. That's the best way I can probably articulate it. And we can come back to the idea of the living water or things along those lines, how to act in the world, how to live in the world, follow my commandments. These are the things that God is giving, or Christ is giving us the lessons to. There's also a certain amount of order and truth. It's order and truth, as opposed to chaos and confusion, that if you're following this way. And that's moving, as you mentioned, maybe towards the center or away to the periphery. And again, that's either you're with God or you're moving away from God. So that's why it's such an important thing. So Christ is with God, and you're moving towards the Christ. And so that's a journey. Let me see. I just have a couple more things. Well, I mean, actually, it's a lot of the same things that I've said. The idea that bringing light into darkness is something that I keep coming back to. I'll just say also, it's important to note the acknowledgement of Christ being almost a temple as well. And I think that that's significant, that he is the human tabernacle. And the only reason I was covering Exodus the other day, so the importance of the tabernacle is something that we talked about. He is actually the embodiment of that. And that comes back to some of the things that we talked about with Moses, and Moses and the words of God that he actually shared. And one of the things is it's a constant journey to the center, towards Christ, our whole lives. It's not something that we just achieve. It's a constant striving that exists as we move towards God. And I think that that's a very important thing. That's one of the things the Gospel of John, I feel, kind of does more than anything. It's kind of this, there is a more mystical, more cosmic perspective that Gary had talked about in his slides. And that cosmic perspective is something that there's always something unknown, and you're always moving towards it. I have some things written about with John the Baptist, but I think I'll hold off on that for now.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So I'll comment on 3 or 4 things here. And Gary, you're welcome to comment on anything that you want. So one thing I would say is that I certainly think that Christ is the new light. So I think I like the term new light. He brings something into existence, which is there. Earlier, I was discussing this with a friend of mine, and I was reading something by a rabbi who is also very conversant with Julian Jaynes' work. And what he was pointing out is that if you look at the contemporary Jewish work, like the Talmud or the Mishnah, it has many of the same characteristics as New Testament. It has the same feel as the New Testament. It has the same way of approaching God, similar way. So there is something about the time itself. So there is a entire milieu at Jesus's time, even in the Jewish culture, which is very different from the Old Testament, because Old Testament, much of it is written, 1,000 years before that. So there is that. So I think there is a new light, and it is a light of consciousness. It is you being aware of God, as instead of just having laws that you need to follow. You're saying, I have to do this because God wants me to do that. That is being a servant of God. That is being, following what God did. Being with God is something which is something new, where you're saying, and that being available to everybody is something that is new. That's the new light of consciousness. And what he does is, okay, I've many things to say, but let me go ahead and make a note. So I want to just say a couple of things. First point is that God is always with you. That's the meaning of grace. God is always with you. You can be with God or not. God is always with you. So that's again a very, very easy way of understanding grace, that God is with you. But you may not be with God. You have to choose to be with God. Okay, I'll stop at that. I do have a few other points that I'll bring up later on, but would love to hear from anybody on anything. Gary, did you have something? Go ahead.
I think I brought it up earlier, an aspect of pros ton theon means face to face.
Yes.
And so we can be with each other and not looking at each other, like a husband and wife that are back to back and that are stonewalling each other. And so God is staring at you. That's the grace.
Yes.
You might not be looking at his face,
right,
but he's still with you.
Yes.
Joe, yeah, go ahead, add it.
So, I mean, one of the most important things that I think that, and I kind of left this out, is that how our words and our thoughts are connected. I think that that's the whole, that is critical. And I'm sorry to have interrupted you. You speak words, they become separate from you. And those are your thoughts. And so the word became flesh. Just think about, that's the important thing. That I think the most important thing is God's words are being expressed into reality. And that comes back to some stuff that Aquinas had talked about with the link between thoughts and words, and how God, Christ actually embodies that. Anyway, that was like one of the most important things in that passage that I completely kind of left out.
And
go ahead.
And I was actually going to respond to something you said, and it relates to this. So you mentioned Jesus being the temple. And there's also in John 1:14, when it says, and he came and he dwelt among us, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's the same word for tabernacle. So he tabernacled amongst us, and then you have Jesus, the Son of God, you'll see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So now he's also Jacob's ladder from Genesis. And so sometimes I'll defer to that phrase. I've brought up Axis Mundi. I'm really kind of hearkening back to the work of a guy named John Walton, where he says, in this Middle Eastern mindset, there's no separation between form and function. And so like when Shakant brings up that Jesus is the light, yet you can't stop there. You have to say, okay, what does the light do? and because the form isn't separate from that. Just like, and you brought up John Louis Sullivan, that form follows function in architecture, that they're inseparable. Or if you have any experience in the medical science, the first prerequisite you have to take is anatomy and physiology, which means form and function. That there's nothing in the Bible, there's no form, there's nothing in the body, there's no form that doesn't also have a function. If we see something, the first thing we ask, especially if it's something we don't know what it is, we've never seen it before, we say, well, what does that do? We just assume that it has a purpose. And so every one of these things, even when we say that Jesus is the tabernacle or Jesus is the temple, the following question is, well, what does that mean? What does that do? And how am I supposed to respond to that? And that there's always that implied sense going on there. That was my comment on it. And so back to your words, and the power of the words, it took me a long time and I'm still not there. But in our modern Western thinking, we've separate form and function ontologically. We can talk about discrete ideas as being out there and separate from us. And in the Middle Eastern mindset, that just wasn't. When we talk about light, we're not just talking about this thing, this discrete thing. We're talking about what it does. Its function is implicit in the form. That's my add to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark. I would love to hear what you think. Evanique, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Gary. Thank you, Shurkat. Every week I, come away with something great, and it's just awesome. So thank you both. And it's always something that's applicable to my daily life, or convicting, I should say. So I wanted to talk first about when Gary was talking about the wisdom of God. And the thing is that, I had this thought that the wisdom of God, and when you talk about the beginning of knowledge, and wisdom being being female, like the Sophia. And when I thought about that, I was like, it goes back to the concept of God not being male or female. In the Bible, God is always referred to as male, the Father, And I think about it, if you think about it, if we say that the wisdom of God is the beginning of knowledge, and if it's the wisdom, that means it's the female, I think of it as the female form. So I just had that thought. And then when you were talking about the conscious, when Sherry Kant actually is talking about the consciousness of God, and when you had those two forms, and you were saying that that Jesus has a consciousness of God, right? Yes. That Jesus had the consciousness of God. I was thinking of Adam and Jesus, and Adam, and Jesus being the second Adam, right? So if you think about Adam knew God, like he knew of the existence of God, but he wasn't really conscious of God. When he chose to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he didn't know God in that moment. Like, he was so new that he had no consciousness of God, because if he had a consciousness of God, he wouldn't have even desired it. It was the simple fact that, like, when you both were talking about choosing God and turning your back towards God, that's essentially what Adam did. He turned his back on God, and he chose not to be with God. He chose to go with his desires. So when I think about that, and I think about Jesus being the new Adam, Jesus turned his back towards God. And when you were talking about, Shrikant, that the cross is Jesus taking on everything that is not God, that's what Jesus did for us. He took on everything that is essentially not him, and not God. And he effectively, by choosing to do that, chose to turn his back on God in order to save us and to give us consciousness of God. And that's what we have because of what Jesus lived. He did that for us to have this relationship with God that was deeper than the people in the Old Testament, in that we can choose God. And by giving us that gift of the cross and allowing us to really be conscious of who God is in ourselves. And it's like you were saying, Shurikant, the center and the periphery, you know, it's, he gave us the choice to like, of who to like more. Do we like God more, or do we like our desires more? Which leads me into my third and final point is when you were talking about being with the center is and hate being loving something less. Which do you love less, the center or the periphery? And that's the question, and then you were talking about, and basically when you choose the periphery, or you choose to love the periphery more, you're shunning grace. And that was thinking about it, because to me it was always in my mind, according to the Bible, one or the other. It's either material world or God. And that's not what this is saying. What you're saying is that or what I interpret that you're saying is that you have these two things. Which one do you love more? Which one do you love less? It doesn't take you away from the material world, because there's no way to escape that. But it helps you to choose, like, which do I choose today? And it helps you to frame it in, is this decision making me choose God less? And if so, then I turn it around. If the answer is no, then I'm fine, right? But you have to look at it that way. And then you said the devil is the periphery, and it's the will to do. And then you talked about the will to do the Father's desires. Well, it depends on who's your father, right? If your father is the periphery, then you're going to do what your father desires. Even if you think that, oh, I'm not going to follow God, you're going to follow something. You're going to be beholden to something. Your choice is, what are you beholden to? What is worth more to you? And so I like that. So, and I think with the one final part where you talked about grace is basically saying that God is with you. You have to choose to be with God. And you have to look at, like, what do you get from being with God versus what do you get with being with the periphery? And to me, I think it's a hard choice, because the material is here and not now. And sometimes God for people is like this thing that is not really seen, right? So it's hard to grasp that concept. But if you say, what do you choose? Do you choose the center, which is inside of you, which is your consciousness, which is your moral compass, over what is in your periphery, like the material world? Then maybe it becomes a little more relatable. And I think that's what Jesus does when he says, I'm bringing you a helper. Because we all have these things where we know when we do something wrong. I think knowing that you're doing something wrong, you have to be conscious. You have to be conscious of the choice that you're making, and knowing what you're doing is not exactly okay. But do you choose to turn your back on God and say, I'm going to do it anyway, even though I know it's wrong? Or are you going to face God and say, I want to do this wrong thing over here, but I'm going to choose you? Or if you're looking at it in terms of center, am I going to choose what's in my center? So those are my thoughts.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to comment on two points. This is a great opportunity because I don't know much about the Old Testament, and I always love to see connections between the Old Testament and New Testament. The point about the vine and the fruit and the center and the periphery is captured beautifully in what Solomon asks. Solomon asks for wisdom, which is being with God. And what God does is they say, because you asked for wisdom, you will also have the wealth and everything else. So it's like, if you have the wine, then you will have the fruit. If you just ask for the fruit, which is, he says, most people ask me only for the fruit, but you ask me for the wine. It's beautiful capturing of that. So it's the fruit comes from the wine, it comes from the vine, but most people just want the fruit and don't they despise the wine. To give another example of, you talked about the cross, and Jesus taking on everything that is not with God. Another great example of that, I mean, the best example of that in Old Testament is David and Goliath, right? David is Jesus. He's taking on the Goliath, just like, Golgotha, where Jesus is crucified. It's the same thing. He's taking on everything that despises the center, which is personified as Goliath. And the only thing David knows, he's not calculating very carefully. He's simply saying, he's not with God. And then he's missing the mark. All this is missing the mark. But he, with his sling, knows how to, hit the mark right at the center. So that action is the cross. And genius of Michelangelo has captured just that moment before he lets his slingshot go. It's captured all the tension, all the determination, poised in that one action. So Michelangelo's David is Jesus. It's the same thing. That is the action. That is the fulcrum of the whole story. So just those two things I wanted to point out. Gary, you have something?
No, I didn't really have anything more to add right then. I was actually you kind of like hit it. Actually, is you started off, is that if we're talking about the universal laws of the nature, then it's like to choose the vine is to have the fruit.
Yes.
And that's really what the book of Proverbs is all about. A person that works hard is going to make money. A sluggard is not going to make money. You have to go to work if you want the paycheck, and that's the theme of the book of Proverbs, is that there are universal laws in place. They're not 100%, and it's not because the universe fails, but because we live in a world where some people are threatened by love. And that's the key. I say threatened by love because that's the key in the Gospel of John, is that the universal law is the law of love. And that's what it's not this prosperity gospel where we're going to go to church and send money to the pastor and God's going to shower blessings of whatever it is. The law of love. And it manifests itself in our lives in so many different ways. I can see it in my life since I've been living in Las Vegas. But just one little segue, there's a Harvard study. It's the longest study that's been conducted as far as longevity of human subject research. It's been going on for 70 years. The current director is, I think the guy's name is Waldinger. He says they track these people throughout all of their lives, and the number one indicator that determines whether or not, like, how long people live, how healthy they are, they measure all these health outcomes: who has heart disease, who has diabetes, what's going on, do they exercise, what kind of work do they do. The one factor that contributes to longevity and health more than anything else is the quality of the relationships, period. It just outmatches everything else. No matter what you think about health, it all boils down to, and it's Ironic. It's exactly what's in the Gospel of John. Love one another. If you're doing that, you're promoting your health and the health of your community more than anything else. And so now we have peer-reviewed scientific study on that too. And so that's what I'm getting at.
Wonderful.
But also, I was wondering what Katie. I've seen that Katie has spoken up a little bit in the chat, and Connie, and I was wondering if they had anything to say, and I wanted to invite them to speak up.
Absolutely. Would love folks, Katie or Connie, if you would like to speak, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Next up is going to be Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. The last couple of things you said, Gary, really, that last thing was great, and especially as a mental health worker myself, I'm going to look up that study and I love it. But I'm really curious, Srikant, for you to respond, and you may have already done it in other meetups because I haven't been going to the John ones, but it's about Gary's reference to form following function. And I know all your emphasis on that over the months, and I know it seems like my version of that form follows function is that we usually talk about it, as Gary said, as this impossible. There are two different things, and it's kind of impossible to get a form that is a perfect match with sort of a function in a abstract sense, but we always try to get close. But my question for you, Srikant, and you, again, I'm sorry if you've already told people this, but do you see the things you've talked about, and I watched a bit of, not all of it, but your metaphor meetup the other night, like the food that is also the wafer, that is also Brahman, or the word that is also like Om, the thing. What Gary kind of alluded to is that maybe in the Middle Eastern mind thought, that is the perfect union of form and function. They're the same thing all of a sudden in this one case. But I wanted you to talk about that if you have a moment. Thank you.
Sure. So let me understand the question. Can you restate the question one more time?
Do you usually talk about form and function as two separate things? And in this world of the religious concepts we're talking about, do you see them as merging into the same thing? In Jesus Christ, in the wafer, in Namaste, in those things. How do you see that compared to our usual discussions? Because Gary related them a few minutes ago.
Sure. Let me try. So I'll say it in multiple ways. Okay. So I want to use this opportunity to talk about something that I was going to talk about, and that is the way in which everything is being said here is very different. This is not just the Middle Eastern mind. I think it is the Middle Eastern mind of a certain time. And that same time, what was going on in India and what was going on in China is actually very analogous to that. And I want to talk about that way of thinking, okay? It is an analogous way of thinking. It is a metaphorical way of thinking. And that's actually the root of language itself, okay? I will let Jesus explain this point, okay? I'm going to talk about 7 things that Jesus said about who he is. He says, I'm the bread of life. Okay. Look at it. So it's like, if you want to understand God, right? If you want to understand God, if you want to understand anything, what you do is that you use a metaphor. The word is a metaphor that does that. That actually something that you know better. Like, this is the word. So now the word is saying that I am this thing, bread of life. Okay, I am this. Okay, so, and it goes on. I am the light of the world. I am the door of the sheep. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. Look at this way of expression. It is very profound. let's stick with, we're doing chapter 15. So let's start with, I'm the true vine. What is he saying? What is he saying? He's saying that there are universal principles that are shaping everything, that are flowing through everything. And he says, I am the branch. And the Father, chops off the branches that don't bear fruit and prunes ones that do. So I am that. So the way in which sap flows through healthy branches and bears fruit, that is what is flowing through me. Now, what it is doing is that it is taking something, the point that Gary was making about any concept has to be concretized, has to be manifested in the world. Even the reverse of that is true. It is that the world and concepts are with each other. So it is going both ways. He's seeing what a vine is, and he's showing you the concept. He's showing you what that means as a principle. So there is these loops going between ideas and their manifestations in both directions. So the ideal of Jesus is making possible us, who is analogous to Jesus. That's what it means to be children of God. So this idea of analogy is the same as the idea of width, or same as the idea of love. It's the same as the idea of metaphor. You know something. It's like, actually, you do not know yourself as well as you know Jesus if you've studied this. We talk about how difficult it is to understand God, but seriously, it is also very difficult to understand yourself. Okay? And you can use all the help you can get. Okay, so when you compare yourself with Jesus, you say, what would Jesus do? Right? That gives you a perspective on yourself. Or when you look at somebody else whom you trust and say, what would they do? Open yourself to them, try to understand how they operate. You can understand, you yourself are like this. See, these are all the same looking things. God, the Word, you, the other person, the concept of width, the Holy Spirit, all of them are analogous to each other. So analogy is a mode through which Tao Te Ching works. This is the mode through which Bhagavad Gita works. This is the mode through which Gospel of John works. Actually, this is the way in which language works. You look into the words here, you will actually see that happening in words. Now, luckily, I know Marathi very well. So I'm able to actually, whenever I read anything, all the words, all the roots of the words flash in my mind. I can get it right there as I'm reading it. And I can see the livingness of the language itself. And that is how the language is supposed to be. Now, that way of functioning, because what you're doing here is that it is like you're using the thing that you know more in order to understand things that you learn or know less. And then you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in multiple directions in every which way to be with the Tao, to be true to your current situation. So it is improving your current situation. It's the same problem of creating heaven on earth. Being with God is the same as building city of God. There is no difference. So it is in the same way you're trying to go towards the center, the same action will bring center to you. It is both directions. So it is that kind of a movement which is quite foreign to the modern thinking, which tends to be linear and one directional causality. So this metaphorical way of thinking, this analogy is different. Paul, did you have a follow-up? And then we'll go to Gary. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving me a follow-up. That's beautiful, and that is so non-linear and non-Western, but there's one little clarification I'm not getting from that explanation, although it was also very helpful. Let's take Om. You've explained, I've read, and we know that it isn't only a metaphor, it is the universe. That's what I'm asking about, Srikant. And you're not at that yet, quite in your answer.
It is not.
Well, I thought that's what it was described as. When you were saying, Om, you are God. You are expressing the thing. There's no separation anymore.
So this point is as deep as understanding the width, because you're saying it is, right? Is, do you, like, if you look at the roots of the word is, it means to breathe. It means to live. Okay, so is you're using in two very different ways. So when these works say is, and when you say is, you're meaning something completely different, and you're not referring to the same thing. So I would say it is and it is not. So it is in one sense and it is not in one sense. And it is not in the sense that Tao is the Tao, and no matter what you do, you won't capture it. If you think you've captured it, you have not captured it, and you've begun to die. Okay, you've stopped growing. Moment you say you have the Tao, you're finished. You're finished, because because you stop. You will stop. At the same time, the approach that Naneshwar has of this combination of tremendous humility, tremendous ambition, and intense love, and a sense of that God belongs to him and he belongs to God. That is what is meant by the word with. If you try to say that it is, you are trying to get a word which is a fruit without the vine. And as Genesis says, that if you eat that fruit, it will kill you. So it is a point at that level. I don't know whether this answers it.
Well, it's as good as we can in using words. So thank you. And Gary, your thoughts are helpful too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Paul. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think that well, Srikant will have to determine if our use of the word metaphor and what we mean by it are the same or not. But I can briefly explain. So this scholar John Walton was his focus is Old Testament studies, and his idea of metaphor, what he discovered is this relationship between form and function. And so he noted that when God created light and called the light day, that this isn't just him naming the light and calling it day. What's taking place is time has been created and the passage of time is being marked. And so this, what he calls metonyms, this analogy of light or this metaphor, isn't just a thing in itself. It has a function there. And that what's being discussed from this point on is the creation, not just of the light, but the creation of the passage of time is what's taking place. So this unity of form and function that's taking place in these analogies or in these metaphors. Sometimes like I'll sometimes push hard, especially on Jesus and the temple, because for most of Christian history, people said that Jesus is the temple, therefore Judaism has been rejected by God. And then we went ahead and genocided Jews everywhere we could as Christians throughout for the past 15, almost 2,000 years. The idea of what the temple is, if we unify the form and the function, that's why I go back to this idea. I like to use the word axis mundi, because that captures not just the temple, but the tabernacle and Jacob's ladder. All of those are axis mundi. Now we're talking about, what does it mean that Jesus is the temple? It means that's where you go to meet God. And so when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes to the Father except through me. Now this unity of form and function makes sense, not to the point that I have to go kill Jews now. Get that out of your head, that we have a different way of looking at it. And then the next step is back to where I kind of grill this idea of virtue ethics in the Gospel of John. This unity of form and function isn't that we do discrete good acts or we accomplish discrete moral objectives. We become moral beings. You know, the command to love isn't just a thing that we're supposed to do. It's what we are supposed to be, you know. And so he is the true vine. The Father is the husbandman, is the vine dresser, and we are the branches grafted into it. There's this unity of form and function, and then we bear the fruit, you know, and we can only bear fruit when we're attached to that, when our form relates to the function of Jesus. And so here we are, you know, John writing his gospel 50 years or so after the resurrection, and he tells this story, and really Jesus is concretizing the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives, you know, is like, how are we as branches bearing that fruit and obeying the command to love, is what have we become. So I hope that that's the kind of the Middle Eastern mindset and what I'm getting at with this idea of form and function and the unity of it. And also like why sometimes I push back or really focus on things, because as a mental health worker, I'm also very familiar with trauma-informed care. And part of my thesis is all about the trauma that people inflict on each other, you know, throughout Christian history.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to add one thing. I mean, the other part of it is the loop. Like, for example, like Nanishwa puts it very beautifully. When you say Om, it's like you're saying Om to a child. Only if you love, only if you mean it, only if you will do anything for the child, and you actually do everything for the child. And when you breathe out Om, when you're breathing in, you pay attention to the child all the time, and do that all the time with every breath of yours, then you are on the right path. So that's the standard for Indian way of being with. Next up is going to be Katie, followed by Becky and Joe. Katie.
I was going to bring the comment that I had made in the chat into the discussion.
Please.
And that is that I had made a small comment that God, or that Moses saw the back of God, and that's why I really like that he is with. That's much closer relationship. And then if you look at the other people in the Bible, they often see God in dreams. So that's an even more remote experience of God. And then my second point, which I'm not quite grasping at it, but I think there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, and it's like the tree of knowledge, whereas logos is the wisdom of God. And my brain's trying to grasp why that's important, but there's a difference between the two.
Gary, would you like to respond?
Quite honestly, I would have to do like a quick word study and to get a little bit more what's the distinction between that. I could tell you that there's different words for knowledge, which is more obvious in the Greek than it is in the Hebrew. There's the word idea, you know, is perceptual knowledge, and then gnosis is experiential knowledge. And so it's the difference between the knowledge of something, of knowing a discrete fact about something versus having experienced it. And so we could actually say that Adam didn't know God in the garden, because to know him is to experience him. And so his choice to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a choice to no longer know God. It was a kind of a rejection of that. But it's also the choice to, I think I brought this up, it's the experience of good and evil. And so he got exactly what God said is going to happen. That day you shall die. He experienced calamity through the eating of the tree. There was no lie there. And it was kind of like, okay, is this what you really want? Wisdom does have like a little bit more nuance. I did a little bit of a word study on it in the past, but I'd have to go and review my notes to give you a more of a discrete, like, what's the difference between Sophia versus Gnosis? There's definitely some semantic overlap. Are you going to be okay, Shrikant?
Yeah. Start to get some water.
But yeah, that's all I have. I'm sorry if I don't have all the answer to your question.
Okay, so what I will say is that there are a couple of things here. Firstly, the tree is the knowledge of good and evil. So it is not just knowledge of like tables or anything. It's like knowledge of good and evil. So which is quite close in my reading to the wisdom. The only difference, what is it that Jesus brings, the word brings, is actually the idea of being with God. So kind of knowing not just what to do, what is good and evil, but even why it is good. It is kind of being with the principle, being conscious of it. So there is a level of consciousness that is there. But in a sense, that's the part of the vine, I think, the part of the tree itself. And the fruit is the end product. So I think the problem is that Adam is not ready. He's doing exactly opposite of his asking what everybody asked God, except Solomon. He's saying, don't give me wisdom. I don't want that. I want the fruit. I want the results. And you can't have it. Because if you try to have it, then by that action itself, you're turning your back on really tending and paying attention to the vine that produces the fruit. So there is some similarities, is closeness to wisdom, but there is this added aspect of consciousness of the principles of the God itself, knowing God itself, which are added by Christ. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I think you kind of nailed it. And I was like in my mind going over my notes, and so like wisdom, and especially in the Old Testament, is oftentimes a euphemism for skill. And so it's not just the having knowledge of all this stuff, but to actually be skillful, to skillfully apply knowledge might be another way of looking at it. And so but yeah, you kind of express that it's more robust than just discrete knowledge about things.
Thank you. And the other general point I would make, and this is again, the scholarship of scholarship related to Julian Jaynes, is to look at the when different things were written, and what the ability was of people who were writing. What was the sensibility of people who were writing it? So early parts of the Old Testament, there isn't as much kind of consciousness of kind of seeing what is going on within your mind and seeing what are the possible consequences of it. And this is not just the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It is the difference between times. As I was saying earlier, the Jewish tradition also, at the time of Jesus, had a very robust oral communication going on, which was of a very similar kind. So the idea of love being the primary thing, that was being talked about at that time. It was captured in the parts of Talmud, parts of Mishnah in particular. And I'm not, again, I don't know much about that. I simply have some good friends who are able to very competently do, things like this. But it makes perfect sense to me, because the difference is so big between the sensibility of early parts. Again, Old Testament is written over a long period of time. So if you look at something like Ecclesiastics, parts of Psalms, Proverbs, there is tremendous consciousness going on there. Ecclesiastics in particular is very much aware of the limits of what you can do in your mind, and what are the pros and cons of that. So thank you. Becky, would love to hear what you thought. Go ahead.
I really liked Gary's comment about condemnation being the basis, and it's God's love that brings in salvation and compassion. And so when we view it that way, because the criticism often is, well, why does God send people to hell? But if we flip it around, it's like, well, now it's gratitude, because he didn't have to. That's not what we deserved. But we're getting that gift of salvation. And so let's see, I want to read from John 3. John 3, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and the men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practiced evil, hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his deeds be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, then his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in God. So with that, it comes down to like faith coming through hearing, and hearing by the word of God, according to Romans. And so, well, the word of God, it's that's what you read earlier, Shrikant, in John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And all these things are made through him, and without him, nothing was made that was made. And in him was the life, and life was the light of men. And I think a little bit further down, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, and the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him and cried out, saying, this was he of whom I said, he would come after me, is preferred before me, for he was before me. And of his fullness we have all received the grace for grace. And for the law was given through Moses, but grace through truth came through Jesus Christ. And so our first, version of light that gave us a way of recognizing the darkness came through the law, but that law was a shadow of the good things that were to come. It paled in comparison to what actually would come, because through the law, that that perfect standard was shining on us to say we don't match up, and that brought condemnation, to know that we would never meet that. And but through Jesus, we see that fullness of grace and truth, and that brought salvation through forgiveness, and that is that brought life. So one thing brought death through the law. The other thing, the other version of the light, the better version of the light, brought life through forgiveness. And so there's something, just like the beauty of that comparison of the law being a shadow, is in Hebrews 10. For the law having a shadow of the good things to come and not the very image of the thing, can never, with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? For the worshippers, once purified, would have had no more consciousness of sin. But in those sacrifices, there is a reminder of sin every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sin. And then, but this man, after he has offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God. From that time, waiting till his enemies are made his footstool. For by one offering, he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. And so, old covenant through the law is that shadow of the better one. And so when we do get the arrival of the Word made flesh, who came down from heaven, that new covenant replaced the old, and that is the actual image of what is the better. And so this is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law into their hearts, and in their minds I will write them. Then he added, their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. Now where there is remission of these, there is no longer an offering for sin.
Thank you, Becky. That was so amazing. That was so amazing. I want to talk a little bit about the old covenant and the new covenant, because I completely agree with you that the new covenant is at a completely new level. And I will also say that there was an equivalent of a new covenant that people were getting to in the Jewish culture also. That's what I was looking at Old Testament and New Testament, but I had not realized that there is something analogous going on in the Jewish world at the same time. So what is the heart of the greatness that is new around this time, that is clearly there in the New Testament? What is it? I think it is internalization. It is consciousness. It is, before that, law is simply saying, this is what God wants us to do. Am I going to do this or not going to do this? Leviticus, there are all of these. I think 1,633 or 1,633, don't do this, don't do that. But in general, it is that the access to God is very little. Even Moses sees only the back of God. Few prophets have insights at different times. There are the words, the laws, the 10 commandments. And it is about the laws being translated into action. With Jesus, what you have is consciousness. You have consciousness of God, saying, people asking, who is God? Of saying, I want to be with God. So it is a radical transformation inside the hearts and the mind. It is the transformation between what Jesus talks about, from servant to a son, where servant doesn't know the purpose of the master, doesn't know the master, whereas son does. That is the difference. There is also tremendous amount of forgiveness and acceptance of saying that as long as you say I'm with God, you can start over at every point. So there is this capacity of resurrection, of eternal life, no matter how many times you've eaten the fruit without caring about the vine. The other part I also want to point out, that even the love command, like if you really look at what it means, it's saying be conscious of the other person. Be with the other person, see who they are. Just like and it is not simply saying, okay, is this other person following the law or not? Should they be thrown out of the community or not? You're trying to relate to them. It's the same width, same kind, what shall I say? It's the same kind of relationship. And actually, the way it works is that it really raises the consciousness of both the people, because, none of us know each other that well. The other person actually interacting, you trying to know the other person, and them trying to know you, and having this open back and forth as friends, as family members, as brothers, that really allows us to know ourselves, and at the same time to know God. It's one and the same thing, but it is a transformation in this new covenant in all these different ways. It is a transformation of consciousness. It is an added interiority. It is a focus on the inner, in addition to the focus on the outer. It is not inner versus outer, but inner as being the cause of the outer. So you can build something far, far greater than what you could if you simply, as opposed to if you just had some set of laws. This means that you have access to the vine itself. The kind of fruit that you will bear is going to be far, far more spectacular, because you have the sap flowing through you, which is consciousness, which is the Holy Spirit. So that's what, just beautiful, beautiful observations, Becky. Thank you so much. Right? Anybody else wants to add anything? Gary, do you have any comments on this?
No, nothing more to add. I thought we had a really good session. I think Joe, if he's still around, had put in
Oh, yes, that's right. Joe, go ahead.
It's fine, actually. I was just going to compliment one of Gary's slides with universal reason, laws of nature, moral law, the wisdom of God. But I think we've covered all that. So
Sure.
Yeah, it was really captured a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if Penny has. Penny, do you have any comments?
No, it was a great presentation and very interesting conversation. So
thank you. Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you so much. Gary, these are turning out to be amazing. So now we go into chapter 16.
All right.
All right, folks.
I'll have to learn something new.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Evanique, for being on standby all the time. And folks, we are doing Bhagavad Gita tomorrow. We're going to be talking about either your favorite verses, favorite chapters, favorite ideas that have really had an impact on you. So everybody, the format is just people will talk about what they have gotten from Bhagavad Gita, and we will have a discussion. All right, so hope you can make it on this weekend. We've got on Sunday, I've got 3 meetups, 3 of them. My friend Peter Borkman, who used to be in New York, has moved to Austin, but he has agreed to come back on doing something that we had planned almost a year ago. And that is, he's going to go through the entire Gospel of John, which he's very, very good at. And he's going to give kind of what he thinks are the key ideas in each of the chapters. So we'll be just sweeping through the entire Gospel of John. I don't know how far we will get. It's possible that we might just do 1, or we might do 17, or any, the full gospel, or somewhere in between. I don't know. But in any case, it's going to be spectacular. So don't miss that. He's a great scholar. So that's at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. At 5 p.m. Eastern time, we are looking at Antigone by Sophocles. Phil has been working on that. I invite you, if you have not experienced Greek tragedy, or I should say, if you have not read Greek tragedy, this would be a good way to get that. As you know, plays are very easy to read, very quick reads. So I would encourage you to read it and participate if you would like. And at 9 p.m. Eastern time, we have Richard talking about social tensegrity, application of Buckminster Fuller's ideas to social structures. And that should be really fascinating. That's what he's been working on all his life. So, and he's going to be, good enough to talk about it. So folks, thank you so much. And thank you again, Gary. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.